Hello and welcome to Simple Time Studios. Today we will be doing something a little different. Instead of a solo play recap, I will read you some short fiction I wrote for Grimmerspace back in the late 2010s. This series follows the Gylor Salvager arc, a character that would appear briefly towards the end of Robert Manus' solo campaign and will appear again in his own solo campaign sometime in the future. In the meantime, enjoy this story that has been cleaned up for clarity, consistency, and YouTube. Frozen Memories. Continuing the morning after the events of Night Shift. Ark grumbled as he slowly walked into the lounge at the heart of the Truthseekers base in the Endless Mall. Having spent all night fighting a psychopathic serial kidnapper that thought she was some kind of wizard, and most of the early morning and debriefings, he was tired. All he wanted right now was to get a cup of decaf to keep him awake long enough to head to bed. Why do we put up with the Vazarians? First they conned us out of our moon to build this stupid mall. Then they bribe our politicians to force through those lopsided trade deals. Now they want our kids too. Ark grumbled to the empty room as he walked over to the coffee machine in the corner of the lounge. The lounge and the coffee machine were much like the rest of the base. Visibly dated but very definitely Fazorian design. The walls and the furniture were either eggshell white or bright pastel colors, and the appliances were over-engineered contraptions that were painted with a chrome finish or with the same shade of white as most of the walls. Ark supposed there was a psychologist somewhere that would argue the color choices were meant to be inviting and welcoming, but he would have to disagree. The balance of the faded colors just felt off and made him feel like he was either in an alien hospital or some kind of carnival funhouse, depending on the color scheme. The lounge was more of the latter, painted in the same soft pastel colors as the pizzeria he spent last night in, which didn't help his mood at all as he stepped up to the coffee maker. Or at least what he called the coffee maker. Given the size of the Vazarian contraption, a chrome cube that was easily as tall as he was and roughly a foot wider, Ark wouldn't have been surprised if the coffee maker also produced everything from tea to soda and beer if he thought to ask for it. Beer would have been good, but it was still too blasted early in the morning for that. Sensing his presence as he finished staggering up to the machine, the coffee maker chirped to life and projected a cartoonish smiley face on the smart matter shell that was eye level with him. "Good morning, Mr. Ark. How are you today?" "Coffee, decaf, black, please," he replied in lieu of greeting it. Any other time he would have tried to be polite rather than if the Fazorians made an AI that had feelings he could hurt, but right now he was not in the mood. "Right away, sir. Rough night? Oh, and will that be a binary or Vodakun blend?" the machine asked. Figures the coffee machine was the only thing that pretended to understand him. "Whichever you have in stock," Ark replied. He preferred the Vodakun blend. Most of the base did, and the Truthseekers didn't really have the budget to stock up the appliances regularly. At least they weren't drinking Addy and Combine Recaf anymore. One sip of that rubbish and Ark immediately understood why the Combine Megaspires were always dealing with riots. The machine complied and soon produced a disposable cup of the steaming hot coffee he requested. Taking his beverage and walking towards a table in the corner, he sat down and began to doze off the instant he set his coffee down on the table. Seconds later, his eyes were closed and his thoughts drifted away to another time on a planet not too far from this one. 7 years earlier. Ark fiddled with his laser rifle nervously as he checked to make sure the power cell was fully charged and properly attached to the rifle as a cargo truck raced over a particularly bumpy stretch of dirt road leading away from his home city in northern Gylor, making him nearly drop the power cell before he could get it back into his gun. Fumbling, he slotted the cell back into the gun and made sure the safety was still on. The mood was tense as the rest of the group riding along with him in the rear of the truck silently performed similar equipment checks or uttered silent prayers to whatever gods were listening. A heavy snow had been falling as they continued to drive through the night, snowflakes reflecting in the truck's headlights as they drove closer to the new Vazorian compound at Dump Site number 3666. Just thinking about the past 24 hours made his blood boil. Crescent Deep had told stories about monsters that lived in the caves beneath the dump site for 3 generations. Massive white-furred monsters that constantly raided the community until 4 brave souls went into the tunnels and collapsed them. No one went there since, and the pile of scrap metal and junk parts just kept growing bigger and bigger until it was more of a mountain than a field. To Ark and his neighbors, it was a tomb, but to that blasted extraction company from Fazura, it was an easy payday. The town repeatedly tried to block the corporation's attempts to set up an excavation site. The mayor told them he had their backs and the sacrifices of the previous generations would not be in vain, but he lied. He signed a deal with the corporation behind everyone's back. Ark was surprised there wasn't an outright riot when the truth finally came out. Still, there was no resistance when the town assembled an armed party to go force the Fazorians to go home at gunpoint if necessary. How could there be? The sheriff arrested the mayor on the spot and was the one currently driving the truck carrying the rest of them up to the dump site. As the compound came into view, a chill that had nothing to do with the cold ran down Ark's spine. The Fazorian camp was in ruins. Fires still burned, and things lurked in the dim light of the flames. Big, white-furred things with glowing yellow eyes that felt like they stared straight through Ark. Things that started lumbering towards him with a stomp that shook the ground beneath his feet. Back in the present. The heavy thump of armored boots on polymer flooring woke Ark with a start, making him nearly jump out of his chair as he reflexively reached for his sidearm. The gun was in his hand, and he was halfway through the motion of pointing it in the general direction of the noise when he finally woke up enough to remember where he was and see what the source of the noise was. "Damn it, Ayla, one of these days you're going to get shot doing that," he grumbled, putting his weapon away. Ayla Fireblossom had the biggest grin on her pale face. The cybernetic anti-personal ordnance cannon perched on her shoulder snaked back into its housing atop her shoulders. Ark continued to scowl as he looked down at the red-headed humanoid woman. Literally as the top of Ayla's head didn't even reach his shoulder. The high gravity of the Vodi homeworld bred a race of humanoids that were short, compact hills of solid muscle, and Ayla was definitely typical of her species. So muscular and broad-shouldered that apparently neither the small minigun-like APO on her shoulder or her heavy body armor were all that heavy for her. It was her armored boots that made him think his nightmares were real. Looking away from the source of his annoyance, he saw that the Vodi Marine wasn't alone. Mimic Wormtail and Stims were both in the break room with the 2 humanoids. Both Orion mice, whatever a mouse was, were looking back at the 2 of them with a mix of fear and disappointment. "Told you I could spook him. Come on, pay up." Fireblossom smiled and turned around, gesturing to the 2 short anthropomorphs with her open palm facing up. Ark slightly glared at the back of her head as he quickly finished off his still-hot coffee. It was her, "Hey, watch this" routine. Again. Stims shook her head and produced a cred stick from a small belt pouch worn next to her medical kit, handing it to Ayla with a disappointed glare. "Should have known better by now than to bet against you. And Ark's right, you're going to get badly hurt doing that." The short, plush medic replied with a wag of her finger. Nimic rummaged through his pockets, pulling out random bits and bobs, before producing a cred stick and checking the amount. "That was really mean, Ayla. I thought you liked him," the chubby Wormtail replied softly. That was typical Nimic, soft-spoken and gentle to a fault. Yet Ark could think of very few people he'd rather have when it came to computer software, digital security, or antique video games. Ayla held up the credit sticks she had won, only for Ark to snatch them out of her hand as he quickly walked out of the lounge. "I'll be in my room," the salvager grumbled as he tossed the empty cup in the trash. You two will get these back when I'm done fuming over being your entertainment for the morning, he added as Fire Blossom chased after him. The voting Marine was fairly quick on her feet despite her heavy armor and weapon, but Ark was quicker and traveling much lighter. He quickly put some distance between her and himself as he swiftly walked through the white-colored hallways to his room. Unfortunately for Ayla, he also had some other tricks up his sleeves. Tricks such as being able to use his toolkit to remotely shut a security door between him and her long enough for him to slip into his closet-sized dormitory room and shut the door behind him. Barricading the durable polymer door by pushing his desk in front of it, he set the cred sticks down on the desk, undressed, and fell face first into bed. Despite drinking a whole cup of decaffeinated coffee, he was asleep before his head hit the pillow. End story.